Welcome to the Project Endure podcast, the place where we talk about life, endurance, persistence, perspective, and so much more. I'm Joe Rinaldi, and I'll be your host. Let's jump in. Before we get started, let me share a quote with you. The great Les Brown once said, "You can't see the picture when you're in the frame." If you felt stuck in your fitness, mindset, or life as a whole, head down to the link in the show notes and reach out to learn more about Project Endure Coaching so that we can help you step outside of the frame and bridge the gap between who you are now and who you want to be. We can't wait to hear from you. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome back to the Project Endure podcast, episode 136. We have myself, Joe Rinaldi, and we have a very special guest out in Colorado, Sean Turner. Sean, what's going on, man?
What's up, man? Good to see you.
It's great to see you too. I've missed your face since the retreat, and I've been looking forward to this for weeks now.
Yeah.
We're gonna jump into some deep stuff right away, but I want you to introduce yourself to the audience for people who might not know who you are.
Awesome. Yeah, my name's Sean Turner. I'm a 26-year-old guy living out in Colorado. By day, I do personal training. I had the awesome experience of meeting Joe on a Made for More retreat. Basically, I'm a recovered addict, just doing my best each day to live his best life. And I think we'll get into it, but right now I'm currently training to do a Ironman, run rim to rim to rim of the Grand Canyon, climb Mount Rainier, and do a 100-mile ultra marathon in under a month. So we'll get to that.
Okay, so this question is only a question that I could ask you 3 minutes into a podcast. So I'm going to go right for it, and then we'll backtrack and talk about your story. But what life lesson have you learned from cocaine use?
Life lesson have I learned from cocaine use? Damn, that's actually, I mean, here's the one thing I'll say about coke. I mean, I had a lot of fun on cocaine. I really did, and I know that's a weird thing to say, being that I'm sober now. Everyone would think, "Oh, why would you say you had fun if, like, it caused so much destructive stuff?" And, like, at the end of the day, I mean, cocaine spikes your dopamine to an incredible level, um, and it's impossible not to enjoy, like, those moments where you're high, but it's the downturn that has always been, it's so destructive, and I guess that leads me to the most valuable lesson I learned from that was you can't escape it, you know? Like, you can't escape what's going on in your head, and there's these moments of, like, momentary joy is not going to replace all of the other things that are going on, and the truth is eventually it does get to where you're chasing the dragon and you just need more and more and more to have the same result, because it doesn't matter how high you go up, like, unless you keep chasing that until an OD, like, you're gonna come down and it's gonna be even worse than when you left it. So, it's honestly something that I even still need to apply in my life, is remembering that, I mean, I chase highs. I'm an adrenaline junkie. I know what I do, but I can't run. I can't use it as a mechanism to run from everything else going on in my life. It can't just all be rainbows and unicorns, or back then snorting cocaine and strippers.
I knew we were going to get something good. And I mean, it is applicable to everybody everywhere. Those transient pleasures don't solve our deeper problems.
No.
And I'm wondering for you if you would also say that the quicker the quicker the high, the quicker the fall, or the quicker the high, maybe the harder the fall, if that's true for cocaine use and just for life in your eyes.
Um, I would say the quicker the high. Yeah, well, I mean, your brain does operate on, like, kind of like dopamine kinda operates on like a seesaw. Anna Lemke, writes a really good book about it, dopamine trains. And essentially, like the thing about drugs is it pushes it up, but there's like nothing to pull it back down. So when it goes up, eventually it just crashes. There's no balancing effect. Whereas, the dopamine from like working out and stuff like that, well, there's the pain pleasure kind of balance to it. And I know with Coke, it was a lot of the times I would just be so depressed. I would lock myself in my bedroom for like 3 days, not talking to a single one of my friends, and just lying there. Like it would get to the point where I wouldn't even get up to pee. I would literally just keep water bottles next to me and just pee in them because the idea of moving was more than I could handle. Like I just didn't feel worth anything. So it literally was at the point where, like, I felt worthy of sleeping in my own piss and shit, and, like, that's the truth of the matter because I had no pleasure, I had no dopamine. So when Thursday would come along and it'd be time to go out again, and my friends would say, "Oh, we're going to party," and then I have a couple beers, and then I get some Coke, like, yeah, it's pretty much quickly taking me from this point of, "I'm a loser, I have nothing to live for," to this extravagance where I can do anything. And that's the truth of it. It makes you forget. It makes you think everything's possible. The amount of business plans I've made at 4 AM, coked out with a bunch of dudes. I mean, god damn, I cured all the world's issues.
Hmm.
But it is that crash. It's because you come right back to where you were. There's no progress. A lot of times we get pleasure after we've made progress. With drugs, there's nothing. It's just this immediate gratification for honestly, you don't deserve it. You haven't earned it.
So I'm going to ask you a leading question here, but is it fair to say that becoming sober has been the hardest thing you've ever done on purpose?
I feel like that question's kinda twofold because the act of not drinking is I can't consciously say it's the hardest thing ever because it's that's just a physical act. I would say, like so, like, being physically sober, that's just don't drink the alcohol. Technically, I actually don't have to do anything. I just have to not drink or snort things. But it's learning to deal with everything else. It's learning to deal with my emotions. It's learning to deal with my insecurity. It's learning to deal with my depression because that doesn't go away. It's not this sense where you get sober and your life is just perfect. That's where the battle is because, since I was 13 years old, I had shut down my emotions. I didn't know how to deal with failure. I didn't know how to deal with asking a girl out. I didn't know how to deal with making new friendships because I had always used drugs and alcohol as the coping mechanism, as the driving force in those relationships. So the hardest part is just learning who I am and like learning to just be me and not these substances or this persona that I'm trying to create in other people's minds. And that's probably it's something I deal with every single day. To be honest, even I got back from the New York City Marathon and I was depressed. I was
Mm.
just lying in my bed, just feeling bad for myself, and I don't know why. And it's moments like that where it's, well, I got to go talk to someone. I got to go show up to this situation. And I would say being sober, there's no running away. There's no escaping my own mind. I don't have an out. There's no relaxing in a couple of drinks. It's I have this depression and now I have to deal with it. I have to show up even though I'm experiencing these negative emotions and learning to do that. It's a battle. I've talked to you about this on the retreat, man. It's a battle. I still wake up some days and I know it's just a battle. It's a war. Yeah.
So I want to talk more about the battle. I want to talk more about the war. I also want to just throw it out there that within 24 hours of you and I meeting for the very first time, we were having conversations like this. And I think that's testament to who you are and the work you've already done to get to this place and to acknowledge that it is a battle and it's not going to get better without you fighting. And before we talk about those things, I also know that your story itself is very, very powerful. And so, for people listening to get some context and background, could you take us back to when you were first exposed to alcohol and drugs, and then take us up to the point where you decided to get sober?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, basically, I I always described it as my natural preset, like my most innate quality in life is this feeling that I'm not enough, that I'm insufficient. And no matter what I do or what I accomplish, it doesn't make it any better. I just have this deep seating voice in my head that's telling me you're not good enough to be in the room. You're not good enough to be here. And honestly, sometimes you're not good enough to be on this planet. And that's a really hard thing to navigate as a kid. So basically, when I was 12 years old, there was just one night where I was crying in my bedroom, and essentially, I decided that I wanted to kill myself, and I was just begging to God that I wanted my life to end, just kind of bawling, crying, like, "How can I feel this way? Like, why do I feel this way? Because there's no good reason for it to happen. I get good grades. I'm on sports teams. Like, by all appearances, I have friends, but deep down, I just feel sad no matter what." And that night, I pretty much cried all night. I actually looked up on my phone ways to kill yourself, and I didn't do it, but that night I made a decision that I wasn't gonna deal with this anymore because I and the reality is I grew up in a family of alcoholics. It's something that runs in my family, so, like, I had exposure to alcohol. I knew what alcohol did for other people, and I pretty much heard that it shuts it all down. It makes all of your thoughts and insecurities go away. So, basically, about it must have been, like, a week later, I stole my parents' vodka like everyone does, and put it in a water bottle, replace their vodka with water because they weren't gonna know. And I had some friends over to my house, and mind you, I'm having these friends over my house, but I don't think they like me. I fully believe that they're just there as some sick joke, and that's the madness of it. I think they're hanging out with me as a joke to play on me as like, "Oh, look, we made Sean think we're his friends, but we're really just using him for his basement or his house." And that's the narrative I have. Because when you feel worthless, you don't see why anyone else would like you if you don't even like you. So the only tangible reason for people to wanna be there was to be using something that I had. And that night, I pretty much would go into the corner and drink by myself. And what I found was everything they said was true. It was this release. It was this freedom. It was the first time I just felt like a kid. I didn't have this persistent noise inside of my head just telling me that I'm not good, that no one likes me, that they're making fun of me. I was just existing as a kid. And that's all you wanna do as a 12 year. I don't wanna worry about the problems of the world. I don't wanna worry about all of these existential things. I just want to be there and having fun and laughing like it appears everyone else is doing. So, basically, from that point on, I made this commitment to just become the drinking guy. I wasn't gonna be Sean Turner, the person. I was gonna be the substances I was using because Sean wasn't good, but the drugs and alcohol use, he that could be something. Quickly, I wanna say it was almost only like 3 years later, my drinking progressed, and as a depressed person, when you drink a lot, you cry. And I would be crying to my friends about how I wanted to kill myself, how I was standing in front of trains, and which was true. I used to wait by the St. James train station for hours and just stand there by myself, just drinking, kinda, like, thinking, like, "Maybe you should." Maybe it would only take 2 seconds. And I didn't wanna be sad anymore because I didn't want people to know that I was sad. I was building this persona as Sean Turner, the fun party guy, the guy who always has booze on him, the guy who's always had weed on him, and the party guy doesn't cry. And more so, I didn't want them to know this. I didn't wanna cry anymore because people were starting to ask questions. People were starting to ask, like, "Are you okay?" And although that sounds great, I didn't want them to know. I didn't want people to know what was going on inside of my head because if they did, then I would have to address it. Then I would have to take steps to get better, and I would probably have to put down drinking. And I wasn't ready to do that. It was the only piece I had. It was the only amount of semblance I had. So the idea of living a life without it was not something I was ready to do. So instead of accepting their help, I would just say, "Nah, dude, I was just drunk, man. Nah, dude, it was just, you know how I get sometimes. I'm all good, man." And I decided I was gonna fix the issue, and I found cocaine because cocaine makes you feel like $1,000,000. The truth of it, it's you snort a line and you feel like you can do anything. Every sadness goes away. You just have this honest God complex where you're just walking around and you're all elated and nothing can stop you. So for the rest of my high school career, I pretty much navigated myself as the drunk cokehead, and I loved it. I loved that's what people thought I was. Because if I wasn't gonna be good, I was gonna be the best loser anybody's ever seen. Because then at least I would be something. And I was good at it. But the thing was I maintained. I still had over a 4.0 GPA. I was the goalie on the lacrosse team. We were ranked top 10 in the nation. I even won the MVP of our county. I had like 22 saves in like the county championship. I won MVP for it. But the sad part about all that is I got high every single day, throughout the day, all day, every day. From 14 to 20, when did I guess 21. I don't think there was a day where I wasn't high. Like, and by like a day, I mean like maybe like 3 hours in the day. That's crazy. I would literally wake up, smoke weed, go to school, leave school, smoke weed, before practice, smoke weed, come home, smoke weed, probably drinking like 2 or 3 days a week, sometimes in the morning before classes, before lacrosse practices. And it's hard for me to think about that now because I was still good. Like now I can reflect back and I was good. I had all of these accolades, and it really sucks to know to think about what you could have been. If I showed up to the practices the way I was supposed to, if I wasn't playing games hot, if I actually cared, if I wasn't a bad influence. Um, but the truth is, I did all those things as an excuse because I was afraid that I wasn't good enough. I was afraid that, everyone was going to realize that I was bad. And at least now, if I show up drunk and high, well, I was drunk and high. It's something to fall back on because I was so insecure about showing up and the world seeing that I wasn't enough, which kind of led to when I went to college, I was supposed to play lacrosse at Penn State. And I was recruited in the last semester of my senior year. I was supposed to come on the team as basically a preferred walk on, which meant I had a spot on the team. And the coach pretty much called me as like, "We want you to be our backup goalie. Like, you're going to come here and you'll be the backup goalie." Sadly enough, and this is horrible, but 3 weeks after that, their starting goalie died in a drunk car accident. Um, and I don't know how to say this without sounding horrible, but basically that meant like I was going to go there and be the starting goalie. And I have this journal, from when I'm 6 years old, and it literally says I want to go to Penn State and play lacrosse. That's what I wanted to do. And now I finally had this opportunity, and I get to the first days of classes at Penn State, and I'm supposed to show up to practice, and Coach Stamproni is texting me, asking me if I'm coming, and I never answer him, and I never show up. And I told everyone it was because I wanted to do drugs and party, but the truth of the matter is I didn't show up because I was afraid that I wasn't good enough and that everyone was going to realize I was a fraud. Because in my mind, it didn't matter what the stat says. It didn't matter what everyone was telling me. I wasn't good at the sport. I wasn't good at anything. And that's really hard, when people are telling you stuff and you're just like, why are you lying to me, man? Like, we both know I'm not any good at this. Why are you telling me? Like, why are you playing this joke on me? And it's just that's the only narrative in my head because I have this preset notion Sean Turner is bad. So any sort of positive term just does not fall in line with that because then that would throw me into what's called cognitive dissonance, which is essentially the internal thoughts you have don't match the actions or the reality. So if people are telling me I'm good at things, yet I'm doing all of these atrocious actions, well, then the bad things I'm doing are my fault, because I'm not just this innately bad person. But if I'm just bad by birth, then I can't do anything about it. It's just who I am. After that, I got a 0.0 that semester.
It's impressive in some ways.
Dude, I think it's harder than a 4.0. I literally got a 0.0 in college. I failed everything,
Hmm.
everything. And I remember instead of being honest and telling my parents, what I did was I cropped the images on the website to make it look like I at least got C's. So basically, after I failed out of Penn State, I spent the summer in Montauk bartending. I was bartending at 19 years old, which was like the greatest thing a 19-year-old to do. And that summer was basically waking up every day to get to the bar at 9 a.m., snorting a line of coke before I got there. The first thing I would do at 9:30 a.m. was drink a mudslide, drink, do coke all day, stay out until 5 a.m. at night, wash, rinse, repeat. Um, at the time, I actually had this girlfriend who, honestly, it still hurts to this day because she loved me, man. Like, she loved me. Like, she saw the parts of me I didn't even see in myself. And I didn't understand why. I didn't understand why she cared about me, and I honestly didn't believe that she actually could. So the only way I would try and validate would be by pushing her away, whether it be that summer I cheated on her, and that's not the only time, but and it's this hard thing because I know a lot of people are gonna say, "Well, that means you didn't love the person," and honestly, it's really not true. I really did love her, but I just felt so unfull. I grew up in a house where my dad always brought home different women, so, like, I thought that's how you became a man. I thought that my manliness was completely from who I slept with, and, I had all these insecurities about the relationship. I had these insecurities that, people were always gonna think that she chose me because she couldn't be with other people. That was the real narrative in my head. Because before we had been together, she had been with someone else, and in my head, like, I could never get over the fact that she only chose me because it didn't work out with him, you know? And that I was just always a second choice, and that there was no way she could actually love me, and that's really, really difficult when you really love someone and you know they love you back, but for some reason you just feel like this pity option, and it's not the truth. It was never the truth, but I couldn't move past that. Um, Damn, and it's just because the people who love you the most, they stand by you the longest. They see what you can be before you even do, so they tend to be hurt the most by your actions, and that's one thing I've always stood by. I mean, just yeah, the story is gonna continue, but one thing I wanna say, I'm not a martyr because of my affliction. It's not for anyone to feel bad for me because of the depression I felt, because of the anxiety I felt, because of the insecurity I felt. It does not make it okay that I've done the things I've done to people. It does not justify the actions I've taken because even though you're sick and suffering, your actions are allowed to harm other people. And you can't just but yeah, the excuse I would always just say, "Well, can't you see I'm in pain? Can't you see I'm only hurting you because I'm hurting?" That's so unfair. So unfair. And that would probably be the hardest thing since getting sober, coming to terms with that.
Hmm.
When you start to ask people forgiveness isn't necessarily saying it's okay that it happened. It's saying that it happened and there's nothing I can do about it. Um, about after that summer, I swept chimneys for a year and then I tried to join the military. And that summer, eventually, my depression was so bad, I would before joining the military, I would basically lock myself in bedrooms for, like, weeks at a time and just do, like, ecstasy and coke by myself, and then I would cry, and no one ever came, you know? There was nights in my frat house, this is right before leaving for the military, where I would get so messed up, and then we had, like, a 3-floor building, and I would go outside the window, and I would just hang off the edge. Like, literally, like, upside down, like, if I drop and I fall, like, I'm done. And I was just in so much pain at that point, man. It's really hard to even go back there even now because 'cause I'm trying to feel the emotions, but it's really unfathomable. to be in that level of pain. And the thing is, at nights, I would never want the nights to end, and I would always stay up doing drugs, like, really, really late, sometimes for days, because once the night ends, then I have to wake up. And once I wake up, I have to come down, and I have to deal with tomorrow, and I can't deal with tomorrow. So I would go out with random people, and I would find other people who were doing just as many drugs as me, hardly ever my friends, just because they would keep me in that space. They would allow me to stay there, and I would never have to come down, and I would never have to face the reality that I am so depressed that I want to die, and I have nothing going for me. Luckily enough, after that depression, I left for basic military training, and my training for BMT was buffalo wings and beers and cocaine, which is absurd. But when I got to BMT, I remember I got off the bus and there's this giant flag over the like massive flag over the dormitories. And in that moment, something kind of just struck over me, this kind of ideology of why don't you just go for it, man? Like, why don't you just try here? Because the rest of my life I had never tried. I'd always deemed myself a loser before taking a swing. I had always deemed it impossible before taking a swing, whether it be with a girl. I would never ask a girl out because I deemed why would she want to be with me? I didn't try to go for Penn State lacrosse because like why would I be good? I didn't try and actually pursue majors or anything because what does it matter, dude? It's not going to make you happy. Nothing makes you happy. But in this moment, I'm like, maybe it won't make you happy. Maybe it won't make everything better. And maybe it won't prove nothing, but you're here for 2.5 months regardless. There's nowhere to go. And that's what I did. I stood up tall, I yelled the loudest. And after, I think it was the first or second night, I was named the dorm chief, the head of my flight of like 52 trainees. And I remember that second or third night as the dorm chief, I was lying in bed and we'd just been yelled at by drill sergeants for hours. And there's this kid Beatles crying right next to me. And this is a really important story just because I was so pissed off at him. I just remember thinking, like, dude, it's not that deep. Meanwhile, I'm the king of feeling bad for myself. But I'm just thinking, we got yelled at a little bit, like it's not that bad. But then I remember, all right, he's 18 years old. By this point, I was 21, I want to say. He's never been away from home. He why don't you just go talk to him? And I go over and talk to him, and he kind of just talks about how he's really sad because he misses his fiance, which is crazy that he had a fiance at 18. Like these good old Southern boys. Misses his fiance, misses his parents, and we just sat there and talked for I don't know about an hour. And I remember I was telling Joe, and I even said that maybe for more retreats. Eventually, he went to bed, and I wasn't overwhelmed with, "Oh, I'm such a caring person. I'm so excited to get back." But he went to bed, and I got to go to sleep, and it wasn't that bad. And in that moment, it was the first time I realized what sacrifice is, and what empathy is. Because I always thought like empathy was this overwhelming sense of, "Oh, I just need to save you." It's just this necessarily of understanding other people feel pain too. And they're entitled to feel pain. And just because I think it's stupid that they're feeling pain for that doesn't make it stupid. And in those moments, I have a choice. Am I going to be there for them? Am I going to listen there for them? Or am I just going to ignore it and live in the world of Sean, where the entire universe just revolves around me and I'm the only person who's really allowed to experience pain and it's everyone's job to cope to me? And I'll tell you what, in that moment, I learned it's much better when you get out of your own head and kind of start helping other people. So throughout the rest of BMT, I pretty much practiced this thing called sacrifice. I wouldn't write letters at night because I would get ready for the next day to make sure my flight was ready, since I was in charge. We had this thing called patrol where people had to stay up at night, and we had a few guys who were struggling. They were struggling with the fitness side of things. I mean, I wasn't in shape, but I'm stubborn. So I can grit through things. I really can. And when they would be working their night shift, they would have a hard time, so I would cover for them. I would sacrifice a few hours of sleep. And I'd be lying if my ego wasn't going off a little bit, like kind of thinking, "Oh yeah, there you go. You're such a stellar guy." But at the same time, it did feel a little bit good. And I did learn that, when I'm not always worried about what's going to make me feel the best, sometimes life does turn out a little bit better. Eventually, I left basic military training and, I went from a two-time college failout drug addict who hadn't gone more than a few days without doing cocaine to graduating second overall out of 800 and I want to 663 people and an honor graduate. And I also got a 100% on my physical fitness exams
Nice.
because I got that dog in me. And I remember leaving for California, and I was kind of thinking that I was writing in my journal, the only thing that's different here is, first you've learned to sacrifice something you've never done before in your life. And I even wrote that in a letter to my parents. I'm like, I've never sacrificed anything. I've never given up what I wanted for what other people wanted. And the second thing I learned was, there's no drugs and alcohol. There's no drugs and alcohol. There was still obsessive thought because I struggle with obsessive thought. And to be honest, by this point, that girlfriend I had mentioned before had broken up with me and moved on to someone else. And to say that I didn't obsess over those thoughts of how much I screwed that up it would be a lie. I mean, that's sat on my head so much at that time because it's really hard to navigate past. I may have messed up what could have been one of the greatest things in my lives, you know? And but I learned that just because I had obsessive thoughts like that and sadness like that, I didn't have to listen to it. Our thoughts are not who we are. They don't have to define us. And just because it comes in, it doesn't mean you have to shut it down, but you can allow it to process and go through, and then it'll dissipate just like everything else. So I told myself when I went to California, I was going to stay in that sort of Zen mode and I wasn't going to drink. The first time I went into a bar in California, I remember there was a beer put in front of me in a bowling alley, and I'm like, I'm not going to drink it. I'm not going to drink it. An hour passes, I'm not going to drink it. Another hour passes, I'm not going to drink it. A half hour before closing, how drunk can I get in a half hour? In that half hour, I managed to drink 12 beers. But that's the physical part of the affliction. It didn't matter that I hadn't drank in months. It really didn't because once I have one, it's on, man. Like it really is like this switch. I always tell people, they're like, I don't get it. Like, can't you just have one? Like, have you ever been really thirsty and all you needed was water? Like, you just need it. Like, it's this physical thing inside of you, and nothing is going to quench that until you have it. That's like me after the first drink. More specifically, after the first drink with cocaine. If I have a beer, it is this unsatiable thing that I just need, bro. I need Coke, and there is nothing in this world that is going to make me happy until I get it. I spent the rest of my time out in California with the military, basically in this thing called the cognitive dissonance we were talking about before, where I know I could do things. I'm waking up at 4 a.m. and going to the gym during the week, but on weekends, I'm getting blacked out. I'm doing drugs again at the risk of failing a drug test and literally messing up my entire life. And it's this dichotomy of like, which one am I? Am I this loser who's passing out on the street, throwing chairs at sergeants? Or I'm this guy who just proved he could be successful, who just proved he could lead people, who has the discipline to wake up at 4 a.m. before going to work every single day. And that's hell. Because now you know that all the failures in your life are your own fault. Because once you prove once that you can do something, everything from there on out, there is nothing you can blame it on. You can't blame it on mommy and daddy's, how they fucked up your upraising. You can't blame it on your friends who don't support you. You can't blame it on the lack of qualities that you have because you've shown it. You've shown you can do it. And now you have to face the hard truth that I am this way because I choose to be this way. I am in the situation I am in because I have made bad decisions, not because I am bad, because I have chose the easier route. And I wish I could say recognizing that made me solve it. It obviously didn't. I would do Goggins challenges, like flip a tire for 2 miles, and then I would go blackout, do coke, and look for strippers. Which one are you going to be, dude? Which one are you going to be? And the depression started to come back. Because now I don't really know if I can escape this demon inside of me that keeps crawling up and keeps dragging me back down. Because after everything I do, I somehow still can't be strong enough to continuously make the right decisions. I can do it for 4 days, I can't do it for 5. Um, Eventually, I left California and I went back to Long Island because I was in the Guard, so you only have a certain amount of time active duty, and I was on my base in West Hampton Beach. In West Hampton Beach, I had a sergeant who was great, but he was a drinking buddy, and he kept me tame. He kept it to drinking, which was better, but then I would cry again, and I would be sad again, and I would go to my obsessive thinking over every little thing I messed up in my life and how I would never, ever actually feel true peace and happiness. So instead of addressing all of that, when my military contract ended, I did the smartest thing and I booked a flight to Thailand because everyone needs to go to Thailand to get on their namaste. I, I should have said namaste and handle this. Um, my thing for Thailand though, I was gonna go and find myself. That's what I had in my mind. And by that point, I'd already been looking up like how can you enjoy Thailand without drinking? Like I knew there was something wrong. The reality is I knew there was something wrong since the first time I had a drink. I knew what was going on in my head was substantially different than everyone else. Actually, when I was 19 years old, I wrote in one of the only things I did at Penn State was write an English paper on how I knew I had a drug problem and how I knew I needed to be sober eventually. If that's not telling, I don't know what is. But basically, I went to Thailand, and my first night there, I got completely blacked out. Did a bunch of whippets, which are laughing gas, and it's actually the video on my Instagram. It's literally I look like a zombie. It's hard to watch nowadays, and back then I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And eventually, I wake up on the side of the road in my underpants without a phone in a foreign country. And I just remember waking like, dude, like how stupid are you? How stupid can you be to be this reckless in a foreign country? I remember I had to walk inside into the lobby and everyone's in there just drinking coffee like normal people. And I'm pretty much butt naked walking over. Everyone's staring at me, my head's down. And I look at the guy, I'm like shaking my head, and I'm like, I need you to let me in my room. He lets me in my room, and for the next day and a half, I just laid there depressed because I think the entire country of Thailand hates me. And mind you, it was stupid what I did. I'm not the first person who's ever done that. I'm not the first person who's ever made that big of a mistake, but I have no grace for myself because I have this thing where instead of isolating events, I make local events global. So if something bad happens to me, I automatically make that everything about me is bad and everything about me will always be bad. So I lied there depressed and thought about booking a flight home, but instead, eventually I went and got a beer. And the rest of my time in Thailand was pretty much this blend of drinking and partying and trekking through jungles, trying to go up to monks because I'm trying to find myself, but I just don't know how to put the drugs and alcohol away. Because I want to learn how to deal with my emotions, but I don't really want to. Because the second it gets uncomfortable, I'm out. Um, this all came to a peak essentially. I was on these floating bungalows. I was telling Joe about that in the middle of it's Kosok National Park. It's this giant jungle reserve in Thailand. It's gorgeous. I totally recommend everyone go there. And you take these like canoes all the way out, like an hour into this giant lake, and eventually you come to these things. They're floating bungalows, and they're in the middle of the jungle. There's nothing around them. When I mean nothing, there's no electricity on them. There's nothing. And I remember being there. There was this German family, this one German girl, these people from the Netherlands, these Brazilians, and these Mexicans. And we all obviously speak different languages, but this was one of the most beautiful events in my life because I remember just sitting around that table that night, like with a little fire up, and we're all just laughing with each other and playing. I forget where we were playing like some finger game with our hands that we tried to communicate with each other through like different languages. And it kind of just showed like there's joy out there. And that was one of the moments where like there's real joy out there. Like it exists. And the ability for humans to connect. I think maybe that was the first time I realized the importance of human connection because I had been shutting it down for a long time. I didn't let anyone get very close to me because if they got close to me, they would realize there was something wrong. And if they realized there's something wrong, then I would have to own it and do something about it. But I remember going back to my room that night, and eventually I go outside. It was probably around 1 a.m., and there's just so many stars in the sky. And I just sit there and I look up at the stars and I start crying. And this was the second time I had talked to God since I was 12 years old. And I'm sitting there crying and I'm like, what am I supposed to do, man? Like, I've literally traveled halfway across the world. I've joined the military. I went to college. I left college. I swept chimneys. I went back to college. I transferred. I went to California. I went to Texas. And now I'm here in the middle of the jungle looking at the stars and what should be in the movie. And I feel nothing. And I feel empty. And I'm so sad. And I just don't know how to fix it. And that's the moment I realized, man, like everywhere I go, here I am. Everywhere I go, these problems are coming with me. It's just like when I shut them down with a drink, I'm just buying myself some time because it's going to come back. And every time I change locations, yeah, it's exciting for a little bit, but then here I am with my insecurities. Here I am with my unsolved through issues. Here I am with all the negative actions I've ever done that I have not worked through. And you can't escape it. You really cannot run from what's in you. And I still deal with that to this day. Joe knows I've climbed mountains. I've done ultra marathons. Sometimes I've seen great sights, and sometimes I've seen exactly what was going on inside of my own head. Because if you maintain misery and emptiness and pain and sadness inside of your head, your mind dictates and narrates what you see. It is just everything in the world is just a perception of what's going on inside of your head. So I don't care if you're on top of a mountain. If all you feel is pain and misery, all you're gonna see is pain and misery, and it's just gonna be really fucking cold. But it's the truth. If you get to the end of a race and all you're doing is this is just deeming and proving yourself without actually feeling worthy, you're not gonna feel worthy. It's not gonna fill any hole. Eventually, I left Thailand, and quickly after that, COVID-19 happened, and I was basically out in Montauk, New York. And at this point, it was the lowest I've ever been. I would drink 2 bottles of wine probably before, like, noon every day, do close to 2 to 3 grams of coke every single day, and I would get so messed up, and this is one of the saddest parts, and I would get so messed up, and I would cry, and eventually I would pick up the phone, and I would call my mom, and I would be bawling. I'm talking bawling, like, I don't know if anyone's ever been, "I'm gonna kill myself" crying, but I'm gonna kill myself crying. And then the second she'd answer, I would turn off and be like, "Hey, mom, what's going on?" Because the scariest thing about this disease is it does everything to preserve itself. The thing that is killing you, you do everything to make sure it can stay alive. Because I said it once and I'll say it a million times, like the alcohol and drugs were the medicine. They were what kept me alive to that point, and I didn't understand how I could live a life without them. I didn't understand how I could ever go to a wedding. I didn't understand how I could ever go on a date. I didn't understand how I could ever hang out with my friends. You know, whether those moments were enjoyable or not, at least there were moments of joy within them. There was fun times within all of this. And to lose all of that, it just felt like I'd have nothing left. But eventually it got to the point where I was just, I was either going to die, I was going to OD, I was going to get myself killed, or I was going to kill myself. I was driving drunk, I was selling drugs in Thailand, a country where the punishment for that is death. They kill you. There's no in between. I was hanging out of car windows. I was just doing reckless things. There was a night where I took 4 ecstasy pills, did about an eighth of coke, drank probably close to 24 beers, and at 9 a.m. had a quarter of shrooms. Like, I didn't care. Basically, this takes us to the night I got sober. So there was one night I was with my buddy doing cocaine in my living room again, around 9 a.m. And I get up to go walk to the bathroom. And on my way to the bathroom, there's this picture of me when I was 7 years old making my communion with a little cake on my nose. And I remember passing that picture and thinking to myself, that kid wanted to be something. Because every little kid wants to be something. Every one of us can think back to that 7-year-old who had these dreams, these aspirations. No one wants to be what I was. No one wants to be a drug addict. No, it is a painful experience. And I just remember looking at that kid and just thinking, like, damn, man, like, you're not anything of what he wanted that to be. But I kept walking and I went to the bathroom. I took a pee and eventually I went to wash my hands. And when I would wash my hands and when I was using drugs like this, I would never look at myself in the mirror because I don't know if a real bender, you do not want to see yourself because I know I'm not going to like what I see. The muck on the sides of your mouth, eyes drooping, the crow's eyes, everything. It's disgusting. But for some reason, I looked up and I looked myself right in the eyes. And when I looked myself in the eyes, I saw nothing. I didn't see a person in there. I'm looking into my own eyes and it is just this abyss. And I'm just like looking deeper and deeper, hoping that there's some spectrum of humanity in there, but there's not. Because by this point, I'm just someone who cheats on girlfriends, someone who steals from his parents, someone who fails out of schools, someone who pushes every good person in his life away from him. All of the humanity that was in me, I suppressed way down into the depths. It just wasn't there. At first, I remember just crying, and then that crying turned to anger, and I'm just yelling at myself, like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Everything you could have had, you pushed away. You destroy every single little thing you touch. You're never going to get it together. You're never going to be successful. You're never going to live a life worth living. And after I walk out of the bathroom, and I go and I look at my buddy, and I say to him, dude, I'm done, man. And he's just like, what do you mean you're done? And my voice kind of drops down a little bit. I'm like, dude, I am either going to kill myself tomorrow or I'm going to get sober. There was no in between. Because by that point, death would have been a gift. The truth is, Sean Turner, that 7-year-old kid, he died long ago. He wasn't there anymore. The person I was is already dead. I was just a zombie walking. And to finally put that to rest seemed better than living the way I was. Because I couldn't deal with the pain anymore. And I think that's the reality a lot of people need to understand is we move at the point of pain. When it hurts bad enough, you will find a way to be released from it. And as sad as it says is everyone gets their release. I've buried friends in the program. And as horrible as it says, like at least they're at peace, because what I was going through was horrible. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I truly believe I wish everyone could figure it out, but it does get to a point where dying would be better. Not only for you, but for everyone else in your life. Because to just watch someone destroy themselves has to be one of the hardest things you can do as a human, especially someone you love. The next day, I went to my mom's house and we went for a hike through this place called Avalon, and she knew something was up. And I pretty much went to her, Mom, I'm in so much pain. Like I feel it still to this day, dude. I really do. Just like I'm in pain and I don't know what to do. And no matter where I go, I don't feel better. My mind just never shows up. It is my own worst enemy, and it is always just recycling these narratives of what's going on. And I see to this day, I still see it sometimes. Like daily, these images pop up in my head of everything I messed up and everything I could have had and everything I'll never have. But at that time, I didn't know how to get away from that. And eventually I told her, I'm like, Mom, I need help. And this is probably the most important thing I will say ever. Right after I told her I need help, I said to her, Mom, I need you to be there for me, but I know you can't do this for me. because no one can save you. No one can just drag your arm and pull you out and tell you it's going to be okay. And that's hard for a parent because they're going to want to, or anyone who loves you, they're going to want to take you. Why don't you just come with me? But they can't. They can support you, but this process you got to do by yourself. And since that day, that's what it's been, man. It's just been work. It's been daily work. It's been some days I still fall into a depression where I can't leave my bed, but it gets shorter. I get better at dealing with it. The abyss isn't as far. I lean on my tools. I'll reach out to friends. I'll do my workouts. I'll try and catch myself in self-sabotaging positions because I still do. One of my best innate qualities is no one else can hurt me as bad as I can hurt myself. And maybe that's why I do the physical endeavors I do, but it's better than the other self-sabotage because I will be the dictator of my pain. And sometimes I need to learn that I don't deserve the pain. I don't It's very easy for us to kind of feel like after everything I've done in my life that I deserve to feel a certain type of way. And it's really hard to navigate out of that. And that's kind of what the process of sobriety is. It's navigating out of this recognition that you don't deserve to be in pain. I had one of my best friends, Melissa, tell me, is like, you got to realize one day you deserve to be happy. And I think that's what sobriety is. It's trudging that road until realizing that you are just as worthy of life as everyone else. But you have to do the work yourself. And it's every single day. But I will leave you with this. There's two ways to look at that. I can either say to myself, damn, dude, I got to do this, this, and this every single day just to have a good day. Or I can just be like, damn, dude, all I got to do is this, and this. And I get to have a great day every day. And I wish it was that easy because it's not. But things like that do help. So, yeah.
And thank you for sharing all that. I I mean, I have so many questions and I know we don't have time for all of them. And so maybe the best place to go is a quote with a follow-up. And I'll actually throw two in here. Seth Smith said, "You cannot defeat darkness by running from it, nor can you conquer your inner demons by hiding from them. In order to defeat darkness, you must bring them into the light." And in a similar way, an unknown author once said, "We stopped looking for monsters under our bed when we realized that they were inside of us." And it sounds like you're fighting some demons, man.
We want to know something. When I was at Penn State my freshman year and I was just drinking and drugs all day, I write poems. It's like kind of weird, but I do. I wish I could still find it, but I pretty much wrote about like all monsters and growing up. And literally the last thing is, I stopped worrying about checking my closet because the monster was me. I am my own worst enemy, and I know that. But I can also be, my own Superman. I have this passion is what I call it. Addiction, I call it passion, obsessiveness, whatever you want to call it. I choose passion. And passion needs to be used. And if it's not going to go towards positive things, it is going to go towards the worst things in life. And I am going to make the worst decisions and I'm going to do it passionately because it's the only way I know how to live life. But on the flip side of that, moving forwards, if I just direct this towards positive things, like the way I work out is going to be passionately. The way I treat my family is going to be passionately. The way I engage in conversations is going to be passionately. And hopefully one day when I get married and have kids, the way I'm a father is going to be with passion. So yeah, it's my kryptonite, but god damn, man, it's also a gift to have it as a superpower.
You shared a quote with me when you scheduled the podcast, and it was a T.S. Eliot quote, and it goes, "Only those who will risk going too far can possibly find out how far one can go." And I think in order to go far, you need passion. In order to go far, you need endurance. And I'm wondering, what does that quote mean to you? And also, what does endurance mean to you?
So that quote is Honestly, I heard it at my first ultra. There's only those who will risk going too far that can possibly know how far one may go. I know how far I can sink, man. And to be honest, the truth is I know it could be farther. The other day I'm walking by the homeless people in Denver and I see them shooting up. And like obviously my mind quickly goes to judgment. But then I realized like that could be me. And this is a really messed up thing. I think if I ever did drink and do drugs again, I think I would be shooting dope on the streets. Because I know I have the capacity to be that evil. I really do. I have the capacity to do bad things. I've proven it time and time again, and I've already proven I'll risk it. I'll risk my life. I'll risk my relationships to be evil for that quick dose of pleasure. But on the flip side, it's if I can go that far one way, man, life's balance, right? Yin yang. How far can I go on the other? You know? And that's why I kind of do these challenges. Like, yeah, it's risky. I'm definitely putting my body on the line. I've gotten into more dangerous things like mountaineering, and I want to continue to pursue it because I don't know, dude. How do you know what's on the other side of 100 miles unless you run 100 miles? How do you know what's on the other side of climbing a mountain unless you climb the mountain? Sure, yeah, maybe there'll be nothing, and I'm sure there probably is nothing, but I won't know. And I'm not gonna go the rest of my life with not knowing. I've not known by not asking out girls. I've not known by not showing up for sports teams. I've not known a lot of times. And that's the scariest thing. I know what it is to die. Like I don't fear death. I want to live, but I don't fear death because I've already been there. So I'm not gonna let the fear of the unknown stop me. I will risk going too far in every sort of thing I do. Because what's the worst that happens? I die. It's gonna happen anyway.
So, a couple things here. The yin yang concept is an interesting one. And what struck me was you said that you know how far you can sink, and you know that there's even further to sink from there. And I love this idea of you can't have one thing without the other. In life, life is about and, not or, right? You can't have the good without the bad. You can't have the sweet without the bitter. You can't have the great without the hard, et cetera, et cetera. And I think I told you this at the retreat, but
Yeah.
none of us could be a good person if we didn't have the capacity to be a bad person. And I think it's so admirable that you are so open about sharing about this chapter of your life where you let the monster rage and the monster was you. And I'm curious why you're so open about that because it sounds like for most of your life you tried to hide from the world and now you are in a very public way open about the hardest things you've done.
I wanna say first of all, man, I say that quote to myself every single morning. I've woken up since then. Because like I said, I still deal with these things. I still deal with these monsters. I still deal with these negative thoughts. And I still deal with these desires to do the wrong thing. And I'm like, dude, that doesn't make you a bad person, you know? It's that one I just love it. But I'm so open because I have to be, man. It's you're a big Viktor Frankl guy.
Oh
So
yeah.
Viktor Frankl, so anyone doesn't know, he's a Holocaust survivor. And he was a psychologist. His big thing was logotherapy, which is man's greatest desire is to feel purpose. So when I think about it, it's why did I have to feel this way, you know? Why did I have to go through the things I went through? Why did I have to be 12 years old being suicidal? Why do I still have to deal with suicidal thoughts sometimes? And it brings me back to like, okay, well, what's the purpose behind that? And I think a part of it now and is to kind of share that experience, you know, because when we keep an experience to ourselves, it has no impact, it's just gonna die. But like when you share it, it could kind of spread the energy and also it's gonna allow other people to carry that burden with me. The truth is I could say I share this experience out of a desire to save everyone else. I'm sharing this experience out of a desire to save myself. And then it is great that it's helping people along the way because every time I share it, I connect with a different person who's dealing with the same things. And they can help carry me a little bit farther. And I am who I am, man. My history is my history, and I'm either gonna run from it or I'm gonna own it and I'm gonna learn from it. And I'm not really ashamed of. it's weird. I regret the things I do, and I regret hurting the people, but it's my life. It's my story, and it's the only one I got, dude. But, I think it's mostly that purpose, man. I still feel pain and I still feel these things, but at least, like, if I can put it towards something bigger than myself, you know, and that's what I need to do. I need to quiet my own ego. People think depression and anxiety is you wouldn't be egotistical. It's actually the very opposite. You're an extremely egotistical person to think that you are so important that the whole world is falling on top of you and that everyone's looking at you. It's the most egotistical, self-centered thing in the world. But by sharing my story, I could kind of get outside of myself, and also remember that, man, I'm not that important in the scheme of things. Me as myself is not important. I am a very small part in a very big machine. But if I share and if I help others, I could be a vital part in that machine. I can make that machine run better. So I guess it just kind of feels like the purpose.
So David Foster Wallace has this line that hit me so hard the first time I heard it. And he's giving this talk, and in the talk, he says that we are all building tiny skull-sized kingdoms alone at the center of the universe. And to your point, I think we all catch ourselves in moments feeling more important than we should, feeling as if the world revolves around us. And we are all so small. And at the same time, that doesn't make us insignificant. And that dichotomy, small but not insignificant, is a really hard one to manage for most people. And I think hearing stories like yours and hearing perspectives like yours can help somebody see, on the outside, Sean is confident. He's got it all together. He's putting himself out there. He's doing these amazing things. And at times he still recognizes his smallness in this world. I think that's really powerful. And I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah. No, I think like smallness is kind of like being a part of something else because my biggest thing, I've always felt lonely. I felt isolated. I felt like the world was over here and I was over here. And at least through sharing, honestly, I got a lot of it through AA. The purpose of AA is to give you a spiritual awakening so you no longer have the need to use drugs or alcohol. The idea of the spiritual awakening, it's the same as like people's God moment. It's the same as the awe experience and like the Grand Canyon or looking at the stars. It's honestly similar to the running higher meditation. And what happens is it's just a slowing down of your prefrontal cortex. And for a second, your ego slows down. And instead of feeling like you're here and everything's over there, you just feel a part of it, and that's the beauty in being small. It's being a part of something is always better than being the bigger thing. It's connection is the most important thing in life, and I think that's why I use fitness a lot, and that's why I love ultra. I love ultra more than the big marathons because it's such a small, tight knit connection, and it's about just being there with each other more so than a race. And yeah, man, it really is a beautiful thing. It's when you can slow down that ego even for moments. It's like even just talking to you right now, like it's not me and you as like separate entities. It's just us in this conversation. It's flow. It's that's the joy in life because we're both here as these small entities. It doesn't exist without both of us. So therefore it's not real without both of us.
You're blowing my mind over here. And I also want to add that earlier I mentioned you can't be a good person if you didn't have the capacity to be a bad person. And you just made this click for me. But if we're feeling smallness, it must mean that there is something bigger. You couldn't be small if there wasn't something big, right?
Yeah.
And we are a part of that, and that is beautiful.
Yeah.
And so with that being said, before I ask the final question of the podcast, I just want to say that this whole conversation stemmed from the simple question of what's the hardest thing that you've ever done on purpose. And it also sounds like maybe part of the hard intertwined in your story is in some ways hard that you didn't choose. And it's almost this dance between hard that you didn't choose and hard that you did choose. And it's landed you here with this beautiful perspective that you have on life. We talked a bit about endurance. And this morning on social media, you were talking about the moon. And I want you to just share what you shared on social media with the people listening because I thought it was an amazing way to create a parallel from a visual we've all seen to a life that we are all living.
Yeah, so basically I was driving and looking at the moon and it was like kind of like a waning crescent. So it's you only see like the very tiny sliver of it. But our brain has this incredible ability where it has a recognizable object. So it's still actually forming the full circle. And if you look closely, like you could still see the full circle. And I'm just thinking, that's so interesting how my mind recognizes what's there even though I can't see it. And I think it just pertains to life so much because a lot of times the things that are inside of us, our capabilities, who we can become, we can't see them. You cannot see it in your visible spectrum because it doesn't become real until you start taking actions. And it's going to take a lot of actions before you see it. But the key is you just got to believe that it's down there. You got to believe that that light is going to reilluminate, that that moon is going to become a full circle again and shining bright in the night sky. And even if it gets a little bit darker, because sometimes that's what happens, the moon's got to go through its full phases. Sometimes you do have to drop down a little bit lower. But eventually, everyone finds their low point, their dark point, and you just start taking small steps. Next thing you're a crescent the other way, then you're a half moon, then you're a full moon. But unless you really believe that you can become that, you're not going to take the steps to be able to see it one day because it takes a lot of steps. And some days you're not going to want to believe it. But if deep in your heart, if you can just remember that it's coming, man, it's on the way. Like your ability to push through. And I guess this would take us back what it means to endure. To endure is profound. I mean, Viktor Frankl puts it best. It's man's ability to endure is solely related to their purpose. Our perplexity to keep pushing through is amazing. It's what does he say? And man's greatest gift, the last of human freedoms, is the ability to choose one's own way in any given set of circumstances. It doesn't matter how bad it gets, you get to choose your attitude and you get to choose who you want to become.
I feel like this entire podcast has been the answer to the last question that I ask. But if you had to sum up in just a few sentences your message for somebody who is in a dark spot, in a hard chapter, just not sure where to go or what to do, and you can deliver a few lines of poetry, if you will, to that person, what would you say?
Honestly, I would say keep going, man. And that's the truth. It's like we said, like I can't guide anyone anywhere. I can't take anyone anywhere. Like you do have to navigate some things on your own. I would say do your best to take advice, but when I was using drugs, I needed to use drugs. When I joined the military, I needed to join the military. When I left school, I needed to leave school. When I was sweeping chimneys, I needed to sweep chimneys. And when I was running around the world, I needed to run. So if you need to run, man, just to keep yourself alive and just to get that next day, run as fast as you fucking can. You know, but do your best in that process to not hurt people around you. I did need to continue running. I need to do some of those things, but I didn't need to hurt the other people because you do not have the right. You are not automatically pardoned from those decisions, but just keep taking that next step, man. And everyone does figure it out eventually. And I'm very confident of that. I've seen guys going from sleeping under the Brooklyn Bridge to going to law school at Columbia. Keep moving forwards.
Boom. There you have it. Sean, I mean, I can't thank you enough for not only this conversation, but for our friendship and for everything you bring to the world. And I mean that And before I get too sappy, I do want to ask where people can find you and connect with you and learn more about you. What's the best place for that?
So right now I have Instagram and TikTok, and it's Sean SEAN underscore Turner TURNER underscore integrated INTEGRATED.
I
Integrated,
was
combination of concepts that aren't usually correlated.
That was so impressive that you spelled integrated as if we were in a spelling bee. That was so good.
Told you I'm a
Um,
wizard.
but but man, I can't thank you enough. And I told you this before, but I see you and I appreciate you and I love you. And I'm so excited for what's yet to come for both of us. And this is just the beginning.
Yeah, man, I'm super stoked to stay connected. Appreciate you having me.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Project Indoor podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a review on your platform of choice, and share this episode with a friend. It helps us get more conversations like this out to more people like you. We appreciate you, and we'll talk to you next time. And one more thing. If you're looking for a community of people all striving to be better together, check out the Project Indoor Hard Things Club. The link is in the description below. We'd love to have you.